Welcome back. Hard to believe it's been like 5 or 6 months. I just can't even contemplate how that happened. Been working, just it's hard to always document everything, but obviously there's a lot of channels out there doing a much better job, so I apologize for not keeping up with this at least monthly, but it is what it is. So here we are. Last time we talked, I think I had spline up to about this point, which is WS tower right here in between the two turnouts, switch stands. The tower I think is on the far side, but there's a road that goes between the two switch stands. So now all the track is in. To this point I've got the two turnouts in, both for the Butler running track and the main, which is the one in the back. And then to refresh everyone's memory, in the foreground, the only track that's in right now is the main. To the far right over here will be a siding, and then this is the northern branch, which was somewhat of the subject of the last video. So the main line is in all the way through the town of Fennelton, crossing over the spline of the northern branch and coming into the town of Craigsville. And Craigsville, not 100% prototypically accurate. I think in the 60s there was a big derailment that wiped out the siding at Craigsville, but I kept it in simply because Craigsville had a branch, a small branch line that served a limestone tipple and actually a mushroom farm that was in an underground limestone cave that, oddly enough, the mushroom farm received gondolas full of horse manure from Kentucky. So, and that was still, apparently based on the research I've done, was still happening in the 70s. So rather than model the next town's siding, I figured having this one here just works better operationally. So you make a little poetic license decisions from time to time. So the main is in, at least to a point, as is the siding. And what I also did here, this is a Y, supposed to be a Y in reality. Didn't have the space to do that. I guess I could have done it and had it tucked back in the scenery, or I'm sorry, in the benchwork and come back out somewhere else. What I opted to do was kind of make a fake Y. So really all it is, you can see there'll be a turnout here, and it'll follow the branch and then connect back to the main, and then you've got the branch itself, which will just kind of taper off. It was a stub-ended branch, but I'll just make it look like it vanishes into the background, and the limestone tipple will be somewhere in this area. And then a little spur, there was a siding of some kind or a spur where they unloaded the gondolas of horse manure. Wonder how they did that. I'm not sure if they used an excavator or how on earth they did that. I can't find any research, but from aerial photography it definitely looks like they did it here close to where the Y met the main line, so I think they had to truck it then. So that'll be an interesting scenery and scenic element that I have to develop at some point in time. So kind of a fake Y, and I think it'll create a number of different benefits. One, it gives you a runaround in addition to the siding. So if there's cars stored on the siding to go in or out of the industries, this would give you, you could still leave your train on the main and still have a third track to use as a runaround. So that's how I'm gonna proceed with that. I got the roadbed in and the cork all the way into the town of Mosgrove. There's actually going to be a tunnel at this point, and then which looks like it, looking at aerial photography and USGS maps, looks like it was actually underneath a strip line, which is kind of interesting. And then there'll be a short little spur here to connect to the Pittsburgh and Shawmoot. I'll just kind of stub that, and that'll be just a set-off point and to pick up and set off basically coal loads for the Bessemer and Lake Erie. And then we get into the Allegheny River. So on my last railroad, it was a pretty short bridge. In real life, if it were modeled to scale, I think it would be 19 feet long. I'm going to model it hopefully 6 feet long. So I've got the spline in at least to a point. Big cutout for the Mosgrove Bridge, and then now we're into the town of Echo. So I've got the Benchwork in here, and again, here is the tie-in to the Rural Valley branch that we've talked about a couple different times. So this is going to be another long passing siding here in Echo. This will be able to pass full-length trains, so this will kind of be a critical spot for the dispatcher to be able to do that. And that's about where I've gotten as far as the Benchwork goes. So we're making progress, but it's been somewhat slower than I had hoped. Also did get some backdrop in finally. It's all curved. Got some here on at the beginning of Mosgrove and into Craigsville, and then probably was apparent to you before, but I got the town of East Butler has some masonite backdrop as well. So starting to take some form and look a little bit more like a model railroad all the time, but we're still really far away. Have some foam just laying there temporarily. But again, the benefit of the spline, in addition to having long sweeping curves, it lets me do the landform can go above or below, which is an issue if you're doing everything on plywood. All you can really do is model cut, and the spline allows you to model segments of fill, which the trains look a lot better on. You can see them, and it's just something that seems a little bit more rare, but very common. I think the railroads tried to balance their cut and fill as they did large when they were constructed back in the late 1800s, because if you did everything in cut, where would you go with all the material? So there should be a balance of cut and fill, or at least a semblance of such, to give it that additional plausibility. So one thing I did here in Butler, you've got the main line, and then there's the Butler Runner, which is kind of an industrial track that was used to switch industries and to just do local work and switching and so forth, and also probably as a yard lead for Butler Yard. Something I didn't originally plan on, this was probably 2 tracks all the way through here, but coming into staging, I wanted to narrow back down to 1 track so that I could select any track in or out of the staging yard. What I was thinking about doing originally, you can see these 2 switchers are sitting here. On the last track, I was going to have a stub here, and this is where I was going to store locomotives. And there's, I think, 4 different trains that originate out of Butler. And the engine facility in Butler was about, obviously scale compressed, was about in this area. It was closer to downtown Butler. And so I was thinking about doing that here, but rather than go all the way back into staging and come all the way out, I have space here. So what I think I might do is put in a curved turnout. I did one over in East Butler. I'm going to do the same one. I think it's a 36-inch outside radius and a 24-inch diameter inside radius. And that'll let me come off right into an engine service facility. It'll still connect down into staging if I ever need to do that, but that way, as crews are assigned work that begins or is originating in Butler, they can come to the engine service facility, get their locomotive and caboose, and then come right out onto the Butler Runner without having to deal with the dispatcher at all, which I think will just be a little bit better in terms of operations. That's one of the benefits of kind of tinkering around and contemplating what you're doing before. I would love to go do scenery, because that's actually one of my most enjoyable activities, but I'm resisting that temptation, and I'm glad I did, because had I ballasted this, this would be a big nuisance. As it stands now, it won't be that difficult at all to splice in that curved turnout. So one update in terms of the track plan, and I'm sure I'll continue to do that as I move forward. I think that's just a normal process, and no matter what you do, there's still going to be something you regret at the end of the of the project, but it's to be expected. But the more you can refine as you go, the better. So this will be one thing I think will add some definite operational benefit. As you may have picked up in the video, I've got, I'll zoom in on these. These are just real quick, cheapo signals I slapped together just on print circuit boards, and I have them way off the main line because I didn't want to put a hole that would actually be where the true signal would be. So These are deliberately far wide of the main line, and I think I've got 5 of these in. The B&O in this point in time had color position light ABS signals. So obviously these are not color position. Again, these are just test modules so that I can validate the whole proof of concept. And Butler's a pretty long block. We'll look at the other end in a minute. What I started to do is using the PSX power shields, which have they can do occupancy either through current or photocell. So using the current portion of that, and an Arduino Uno was able to get the ABS system to work really effectively. Looking back at it, I mean, I'm not sure there's a much easier way to do this, potentially just using a pair of transistors and a handful of resistors and a diode. Probably be less expensive, although you need one of those for each signal. This Arduino is running 3 signals, and the reason I'm doing that is because in the staging, when you get to the end of your ABS system, you kind of have an odd scenario where you only have trains that are moving in one direction. So everywhere else, the Arduino is going to run 2 signals, basically the signal in each block. This particular Arduino is running the one coming out of staging and the 2 for Butler, and was able to get everything to work with just Cat5. So having 4 pair of wires in each was just enough. I didn't have any extra. 4 in each are running the signals, and then the other 4 are doing the logic. And also just to have the Arduino function reliably, so there's no false detection. I have a set of 10,000 ohm pull down resistors on the input pins of the Arduino, so that when it's not occupied, it's pulled basically down to 0 volts at a very low current. But worked really well. I can show you. So I have another pair of signals here. So this is the west end of the Fennelton block, and then here's the signal, which is the east side signal for the Butler block. And again, there's no Arduino here. There is just a terminal block where the signals tie in, as well as the logic is transferred from one block's system or setup rather to the next. And actually jumped the grounds together here so that all the Arduinos are grounded together. So that's the plan, is that each block would have its own setup with PSX power shield. Now here I've got 2, just like I did over in Butler, because the main is on one. That's the main, and then everything else, like the northern branch here that I'm leaning on, the northern branch, the siding over here is all on the second Arduino, just so that the second power shield, so that there's no, otherwise that would trigger the occupancy. Over in the staging yard, I actually used a PSX and a BD20 to do the approach. And I may transition to that. Obviously the BD20s are a little less expensive than using a whole PSX, but at the same time it's nice that if someone's on secondary trackage and runs over a turnout the wrong way, they're not tying anything up on the main line in terms of tripping the breaker. So I haven't decided if I'm going to keep going that way or not. So again, here is a Arduino, same setup essentially, and this one's just running 2 signals. Sorry, climb underneath. So yeah, coming out of the I think it's J4 pins 3 and 4 are what connect together when there's current occupancy, and so then the output from that, so it's getting 5 volts to the PSX, 5 volts from the Arduino to the PSX, and then 5 volts out on the red wire that comes into this first pin. So again, these 4 are for the signal to the east. These last 4 terminals are the signal to the west, and then the 8 in between are all logic. And so the this block provides occupancy when it puts 5 volts into that pin. That's also relayed west and east to establish occupancy for this block. And I have done them so that they're approach lit, and I'll do a demonstration of that momentarily. But along with doing that, obviously you need resistor wheel sets, so I've started down that path as well. The approach I'm using is using wire glue on intermountain axles. So I don't know, I've gotten like 30 cars done so far, and you know, just using a multimeter just to check resistance. There's some variability, at least I'm trying to get better at making them consistent. Some of them come out a little above the rating of the resistor, some a little bit below. Wire glue seems like it's a little inconsistent. I've tried a couple different methods, even tried cleaning things and filing things, so still working that out, but it's working. So at some point in time I'll have enough cars that everything will function properly. The other thing I'm doing 2 resistor wheel sets, 2 axles per car, just so that if you have a long car, it hangs into the block longer before the signals change. And cabooses are going to get 4 every single axle I'm going to do, and I've done 3 cabooses so far. Part of the reason, that's really not critical for ABS, but part of the reason I'm doing that is because further up on the railroad to the east, from C&M Junction, I think up to Falls Creek, that was all CTC in the early 70s, where they were removing the second main and going just a single track main with CTC. So much more critical in CTC that you don't have a car hanging in the interlocking and then the dispatcher does something that throws a switch underneath a car. So that's why I'm doing the 2 axles now, because that's the plan for the future. So let me turn the railroad on and we can do a quick demonstration. Okay, got everything fired up. That's the other nice thing about the Arduinos, is they're just plugged into a 12 volt power supply that I've basically made a 12 volt bus that runs the base of the railroad, and they're all tied into that, and then they generate either 5 or 3.3 volts. I've been using 5. So you turn the railroad on and they just kind of come on. That's the nice thing. With the CTC, I'll probably use JMRI Panel Pro, and then you have to now you have to have a computer turned on, and it gets a little bit more complicated. So the ABS is nice, where it just comes on and is done. So you can see this signal is illuminated, so we've got cars occupying the main here, so that block is on. And what I did in the staging yard, and I'll explain in a minute, is the approach, that's on the BD20, and then once you get into each specific track, those are all, as we talked about before, those are all powered individually by the plug. So what track? 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's see if I counted correctly. Yep. All right, so now we plugged that in, and now the signal is yellow because this short little approach block is empty, but the staging track is occupied. So what that'll do, when you're going the reverse direction, the turnouts will not be set up through the throat, because I don't think I can figure out a way to do that. But at least if you've got the plug in the right track, you should get a green when you're here. And if you've got the wrong track, then you might get a yellow. But you'll note that this signal is not turned on because the approach, this short little approach block, is not occupied. So if we pull our train into the block, it should go red right away, which it did. and I have it set up to go onto the Butler runner. So still looking at rules. I actually purchased a rule book for chassis from about 1970 or 72, so proper time. And every railroad was a little bit different. In some cases, the divisions were different. So ABS signals are not absolute signals, and they're permissive signals. So in other words, you can move, if you have dispatcher's clearance to do so, you can move through a red signal, but I believe you get to stop first. The other thing I will have to do with the ABS signals is any turnout that is on the main, so like this one that ties into the Butler runner, when this is in the the reverse position, when it's not in the normal position, it needs to create occupancy, which would give you red signals at either side. So I think what I'll do is I've developed a scheme with some piano wire, just kind of do a vertical piece with a hook on it, so that on the end of the Caboose Industries ground throw, it would spin that, and then underneath I'll leave a long tail that would move and touch a post. And all I'm really going to do is just short the two rails together through like a 3,000 ohm resistor or something like that, and that'll be the same as basically having a car with the resistor wheel sets short between the rails. But every turnout on the main will have to do that, reporting to the block that the turnout is in. And the nice thing about that is if someone leaves a turnout open, we all know that happens, then both signals on either side of the block to trains coming into that block will show red. And if they walk around for a while and like, hey, there's no one here, then they can come to the conclusion that, oh, somebody must have left the turnout open. So hopefully that'll eliminate or at least reduce some of the inevitable issues with running through turnouts. So now we'll come through the Butler runner. And we're going to have a derailment. I was doing some work switching cars to access them for the to put wheel sets on them, and I must have knocked one off the track when I was doing that. See if I got them. If not, the re-railer should take care of it, but now that we've exited the approach area, the throat for the staging, that signals back to green. And again, only the main lines are signaled. So this running track is not signaled, but because it was occupied by cars, we went through on the runner. But we do have some traffic up ahead here. I'll have to get out of our way momentarily. All right, we got the Butler local out of our way here. So I overshot just a hair, and we're in the Craigsville block too, but regardless, you can see that both ABS signals are now red. And the last ABS signal I've got installed thus far, which would be the east side of the Craigsville block, the Mosgrove block would be next. That now shows green. So that's where we are so far. Here is my wiring diagram that I prepared for the ABS signals, PSX. You got the Arduino, a little pull-down resistor board, and then all of the appropriate wire colors for each of the terminals. And yeah, I'm really happy. I wasn't 100% sure I was going to do signals. I'm not sure when I decided to do that, but we jumped down that rabbit hole. So that's definitely going to be an interesting add to the railroad. And again, that's what was prototypically there. So the other nice thing that I think I've talked about, but this is the first time I think I'm showing everyone, is that these using spline and the minimum mainline radius of 40 inches is really nice. So much nicer than the 24 and 27 inch radius turns I had on the previous railroads. So really nice long sweeping curves, which gives you much more of a feel of Western Pennsylvania, and particularly the shot that I held here for you a while. You can see the sweep to the left all the way up into East Butler, and then sweeping here into the Fennelton block. And not sure it's apparent on the video. I could have set up a tripod, and maybe I will in a future video. Not sure if the super elevation is apparent, but it is. Standing here in person, it definitely is. I don't know if you can get a sense of it. Yeah, perhaps you can. But that is the update for now. Hopefully before too long I can get us into the other room. And like I said, now that the peninsula framing here is done, I'm starting to get into bench work on the echo area over here, and starting to add the backdrops. We're getting there. So appreciate your patience. Sorry it took me a while to get back to shooting some videos, but been busy, and I'll try. And now that we got the holidays coming up, maybe I should be able to pull aside some time and shoot a couple more videos. So that's it for now, and we'll see you next time.